All right. All right, so we are officially recording now. So thank you, everyone. This is the Florida Codes Steering Committee met a few weeks ago before the Christmas break, and we all decided that we'd been talking about doing some trainings for a while, and we voted on a few ideas. There were some ideas out there, and one of those ideas was data import. Of course, data import is a tool that we use to aggregate, to take data, to load it with the EDFI standard. A lot of things that we focus on with Florida Code is EDFI, and how the EDFI data standard and its technologies can help improve interoperability. How can we get, we got to start getting data from various systems and stuff and be able to align it with data from other systems. And so if you're not 100% familiar with what EDFI is yet, I definitely encourage you to look into that more. And of course, we have this Florida Code Collaborative in Florida to kind of do EDFI together. So one of the tools that the Michael Susan Dell Foundation created and has given it to the EDFI community across the nation is a tool called data import. If you look at my screen here that I'm sharing, I just want to verify everybody can see my screen, what I'm sharing. I've got a website. If you'd like to either just let me know or just type in chat. I just want to make sure everybody can see this. It should be a data import website.
Yes, I can see it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, guys. All right, so and gals. So we've got data import here, and this is the EDFI TechDoc site. You can get to us just techdocs.edfi.org. You can see my little picture up here on the right. It just indicates I'm logged in. And you can still see this without being logged in. So if I log out, if you don't necessarily have an EDFI login yet, you can still get one. Just here's the base site, right, at techdocs.edfi.org. And if you come down to the bottom, it's listed under the tools area. So we have EDFI tools, data import, and you click on that. And now that I'm logged out, I don't see quite as much information, but I do see this overview here. And really, without reading it verbatim, you're welcome to read that. The goal is that there are systems out there that have not yet, they either don't have a way to do EDFI because it's just historical data, like state assessments and files that you just have lying around, or the vendor just hasn't, maybe they are existent now, but they have CSV exports and they haven't aligned themselves with the API yet, the EDFI API yet. And so you're still working with them on that. A great example of a case where this has happened for us is that a lot of the NEFAC districts, and I'm going to take I'm Sherrod Keene, I'm the president of Florida Code, but I'm going to take my Florida Code hat off, and I also work at NEFAC, the Northeast Florida Educational Consortium, which is where my experience has come in with this. And I have a colleague on here with me also, Taylor Brown, who is, he and I together and a few others here at NEFAC really had to kind of knock our heads together to figure out data import. So today we're hoping to just kind of share some of the things we've learned here at NEFAC. But one use case that NEFAC had was several of its districts had iReady data. And they had it in CSV files, and the districts were taking that iReady assessment data, and they were like doing Excel spreadsheets and all this kind of stuff. Well, we use EDFI here, and so we have a database, the operational data store, to stick all this data in. And of course, we have our SIS data, our student information system data loaded, and we have our HR data loaded into EDFI. And so when all that data is living in one spot, in the operational data store, it makes report writing and things easier. And plus, it's broader, right? Now it's not just the assessment information, but I can connect that to other information. And so, so one of the use cases we had for using data import was the iReady data. At the time, iReady had not mapped itself to EdFi, had not released an EdFi connection. And as I understand it, they have now released an EdFi connection on Suite 3 of EdFi. The I'm going to use this use case today for Suite 2 of EdFi, which NEFEC is still using Suite 2 of EdFi in production for this current school year, which is 2020 to 2021. But NEFEC will be going to Suite 3 of EdFi for next school year, so 2021, 2022. And so at that point, we're excited that all the iReady stuff, we'll be able to just connect directly to iReady and not have to do this mapping. But this is a use case we'll talk about today, is getting the iReady data loaded into our Suite 2 of EdFi here that we have. And so what we did, what it is you take all these CSV files and they have all the student data. And to get it into EdFi, we really, you can use this data import tool. I have a drawing here. So just hopefully you can see this image that I have here, this PowerPoint slide. And what we've been doing for a while is, we have our SIS vendor that's EdFi certified. We have another assessment vendor that NEFEC districts use that's certified, right? So here's just some examples, and the data comes out of these systems, and it comes in the data's transforms from these systems to the EdFi standard, and that being the JSON format. It hits the EdFi API and then gets loaded in our operational data store. So that's kind of the norm around here. And then, all right, well, so we have this CSV file, this iReady data. Now, iReady obviously is assessment data, and our use case was the assessment data of iReady. But you could literally have a CSV file of any of the domains that EdFi covers, and EdFi covers financial domain. You can import HR data. You can import, student data and all the domains within the student. And so so my use case and what I'll kind of use to do this training today is assessment data, but it's not limited to assessment data, okay? But in this case, we had some iReady CSV files, and they were living, it probably should have drew this in a better way, but they're actually living in an iReady SFTP folder. And what we did was we used data import, and we pulled in that CSV file. We did some mapping here, and then it was able to then spit out that CSV data. It was able to map it to the EdFi standard and then send it through the API just like all these other systems. So that's great. You're not like, now it's in the EdFi, it's in the ODS. You can now do all your reporting and visuals and whatever systems you have to do reports and visuals and things from here. You can imagine that just extending on to the right. But today, our focus is about data import. So before I go any further with that, I just was curious if anybody has any questions about what this use case was with iReady data. If you have any questions about just this image here that I'm showing, feel free to either speak up or write in chat. It looks like I do have a question, or at least a comment from Sean Say. For those of us not important or working with student data, we can do the same with staff data, ? Yeah, so definitely that's all of the domains. And then I'm sorry, so it says for those of us not importing nor working with student data, can we do the same with staff data? Yeah, so now NEFEC, and I believe in Alachua you guys are using this tool that NEFEC generated. NEFEC also created, I could create a whole nother little image here for the HR data from Skyward. And that PHP script that NEFEC maintains for HR data is just kind of an alternate way of doing it without using data import. It basically does the same type of thing that data import does, but more of on a just, there's no UI, it's strictly programmatic. Whereas data import, you'll see in a few minutes when we log in, provides like a UI, right? You're able to log in, you're able to, you don't have to be a programmer necessarily to make all the mappings and connections. You do have to kind of understand the standard and things. And today's really just kind of an intro, like what does it look like? How do I get started? Where's all this information at? And then you guys are always welcome to follow up with questions and stuff later on. So, great question. Any other questions? All right. So let's jump back over here. Now it'll if I click what's new here, it kind of gives you the history of how data import got started. You can go to the bottom and you can see the enhancements and things. And their most recent release is 1.1.0, which NEFEC actually just upgraded to that, I don't know, a few weeks ago. And the EdFi community, I'm just going to log in real quick so you can see. Once you log in to the EdFi site, you get a getting started page, which then dives into like the installation, template sharing, first time configuration, quick start. And then there's even technical articles. How can you pre-process CSV files, product improvement. So there's, if you don't have this login yet and you plan on using data import, you need to go ahead and get this EdFi login. So we can save that for another discussion because we want to focus on data import today. But so I wanted to hop over here to the getting started link, and again, there's installation here. It gives you prerequisites for what you would need on your server, or even you could just do this on your own workstation, your own computer. And there's various ways of doing the install, whether you want to do it by, there's an executable you can run. You can use PowerShell to install it, or you can just do a manual installation. So whichever way you want to go that route. And then when you get to this first time configuration, it kind of walks you through. Now I should mention this, that data import is using, like I showed you a second ago on this image, it is using the API and the ODS. So if you don't have an API, the EdFi API or the EdFi ODS, then you're not going to get data import to work, because data import's whole goal is to take a CSV file, transform it, and load it through the EdFi API into the ODS. So that is a prerequisite for using this. And then one last thing that I'll show you is they have a quick start. I'm basically going to kind of give you an overview of kind of where everything is and what it does, but you really can get a lot out of this quick start because they also provide you sample CSV data. I mean, so if you don't have like a real file that you want to start with, and you have this sample data loaded in your ODS already, EdFi calls it grand bin data. If you've already got that grand bin data loaded in your like your development API ODS, then you could use their templates here. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that to you as well. And all of these screenshots that you see here are things that I'm going to show you live in NEFEC's data import environments. All right. So here you go. So here's NEFEC's data import. So that it does have a login. We host it here at NEFEC, and I believe our server here is actually, you can't get to it from the outside world. This is an internal thing that we have, even though it is secured with a login, and you can control who has access to it. The security roles within this right now, EdFi has not built in like an administrator and a user role. Once you log in, you then can do everything. So NEFEC likes to kind of keep some of this kind of stuff just disconnected from the world. We can get out to the world from the server, but we limit connections into this server. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. You can see we're on 1.1.0. Not something you want to see. I haven't seen that in a while, actually. Let me try this again here. I think there's like a little bug whenever you log out and try to log back in. So let me start with a fresh browser. Okay. All right. So, so it just logged us in, and it took me to an activity screen. And you can see across the top, there's different tabs across the top for areas within data import. This is the data import tool. You can see like really just a history of loads that we've done. And we probably have more than this. They just don't show here. But you can see something started back from October of 2019. And we go forward. One of the new features within EdFi, I'll show you here in just a second, is that they allow multiple EdFi connections. That's important to NEFAC because we do a lot of this work for our NEFAC districts. And so each district has their own key and secret. And so, you know, we like to kind of separate things out. Now, that's a new feature in 1.1.0 that we just uploaded, and we actually haven't used it yet. So if you see right now, we're on the default API connection. That's where all the history's at. If I go to, if I click, you know, Dixie iReady, you're not going to see a history here because we haven't used it. It's that new for us, this new feature. So, all right, so let's go and let's look at the admin. Let's talk about how you would when you first log in, some of the things that you would do. So you go under admin and go down to configuration. And this is where you allow, first of all, you set up your API connections. There's also a template sharing service that we'll talk about in a minute. User management, this is how you allow new users to log in. And then there's a product improvement. I love the EdFi built-in this product improvement option. You see this little down here in the far right-hand screen, there's a submit an issue or idea. If you click on that, if you see any kind of bugs like the one we just saw, I probably could submit that. Or any just enhancements or things, you can go ahead and fill that out here, and it goes into EdFi's ticketing system that they use to work from daily. So really cool that they've done that. This is the EdFi API connections, and you can see we have all of the NEFAC districts are hosted in one ODS. So you'll see all our URLs, all our API endpoints are the same. But if let's say you had a development environment and a production environment as a single district, you could manage both of those right here. You could, set one up. You just add an API connection. You give it a name. You could call it, production, whatever your production's URL is, and then give it that key and that secret. Oops, and then when you test connection, it'll verify. I'll say, yep, connection successful. And then once you can get a successful connection, then you can save the changes. But it won't let you save it until you get till you test the connection and make sure everything's working properly. So let me back out of here. You can see if I edit this, there it is. It covers up your key and secret, which is good. So all right, so now we have connections. Now, in other words, what we've done is we've said, if I bring our picture back, we've now let data import test and successfully make sure it can authenticate with the API and the ODS. But we haven't done any mapping. We haven't touched the CSV or anything yet. We're just making sure that we have a good connection. The next thing that you'll do is you'll be able to take a look at the template sharing option I just mentioned a second ago. This is great. NEFEC, well, I guess you could actually say NEFEC did this work, but we shared it back with Florida Code with all of you guys. And others have also shared things. So EdFi, they've released a set of templates for data import, for state assessments. Of course, they're probably not Florida specific. EdFi's base is in Texas, and they use that Grand Bend data a lot. So it's not going to be like a perfect mapping for, say, like the FSA or anything, but it could get you started. Bias Consulting, you can see they've released a lot of templates. NWEA, Dibbles. I'm not sure what iRead is, but maybe some of you are familiar. Catapult. Here's the work that Florida Code did for iReady for the 2.5. And then also Bias did Pearson work here. So you can see the dates they're published, and anybody in the community. So if one of you guys, you do your own set of mapping on something and you want to share it, you just click share template, and you go through and you select the mappings you've done, and you share it, and that's how easy it is to share it in the community. So I love that feature is built in, and all of the iReady stuff that we did that you're seeing today, you're able to come here, you click view, and go import template, and boom, sucks it right into your system and you can start working with it. So I will say that we probably I don't know if we made one. iReady made one update recently, and we made the update locally. We call it version 2. You'll see in a second, and I think this is version 1. So if any of you are interested in that, let me know. That way I can make sure I get the version 2 out here for you guys. All right. There's also a way to just do the same type of thing, import, export things, just through, I think it's through a JSON file as the format. So if you wanted to share things locally without doing it through this template sharing process, you could do that as well. And then we can look at logs. Really, the logs, I feel like, is something we'll look at kind of later, because really that's just about the things you've loaded and the things you've done. So let's start looking at like the actual mapping part. What's involved with taking a CSV file and mapping it, and that lives here under the configure. So really, I wish they had it in order for the way I like to think about starting it, but I'll just highlight that here. One of the first things you have to do to get an assessment into EdFi is you first have to load the assessment metadata, right? So the way EdFi, and I'll pull up an EdFi database. Hopefully all you guys can see that. If you can't see it, give me a no. Otherwise, I'll just assume you can see it. I've taken our 2021 Dev ODS here, and I've filtered it down to give me all the tables that say assessment, because again, that's our use case for today. Here's all the assessment-based tables. This top table here is kind of like you think of it as like metadata around assessments. So you can see we've loaded like ACT data here, right? And you can see the various namespaces. So we separate out each assessment based off of the district's namespace. For you guys, it'd be a little different because you're just your own district. The assessment title, and then we even have some null fields here. You don't have to have null fields. Obviously, they're there for you to be able to fill in if you'd like. But you can't send a student data for ACT until you first have ACT metadata there. And so all of these assessments, all these tables that start with assessment, assessment academic subject, assessment assessed grade level, assessment category, these are things that I consider in my language metadata, and the data import would kind of they're kind of using the word Bootstrap. So if we come to Bootstrap, we have to load that metadata first. So I'm clicking on that, and you can see here are Bootstrap configurations. And we have one for, like, you can see here's says objective assessments. Here's like assessments. So let's take a look at this. So Curriculum Associates, iReady diagnostic data, ELA version 2. So that's the one I said, we updated most recently, assessments. So if I edit this, really this is just some JSON data formatted into the Ed5 data standard. And, there's documentation on that. I don't want to get into that now. But basically, we're identifying, all right, is it an adaptive assessment? Yes, true. What's the category descriptor? This is a diagnostic. What's the identifier we're going to use? If you remember a second ago, we had one identifier was like ACT, and you saw that kind of big string of stuff. Well, in this case, we're identifying it as CA, iReady, right? So this is a unique value to identify this assessment. And then this is the title, the namespace. Typically, namespaces are supposed to be within whoever is the owner of this data. So in this case, it's Curriculum Associates. All right. So I don't want to get into necessarily like standard related things. I just want to show you that this is part of the process of data import. Here's assessment reporting methods. I see a question here from Mike. Is this installed on the same server as the ODS API? No, in our case, we have a build server. So it does not have to be installed on the same server as your ODS API. And that's great. Kind of like, think about this as a client, like your sys client or your assessment vendor that has certified with Edify, right? It's just in this case, you've got a CSV and it's any CSV, and you're been able to pass that data through the API. Yeah, thank you, Mike. I hated that those little key and secrets popped up. I was like, no. So yeah, I am going to do some editing to make sure some of that kind of stuff doesn't show. Thank you for pointing that out, Mike. All right, so again, Bootstrap data is kind of like metadata. The next part that you do is the lookups. So a lookup would be like, let's say in iReady, that they display the grade level as 1, right? But in wait a second. Here we go. So let's say that they display it as 1, right? But really, we know that Ed5 wants that as FIRST All right, so this is what that's doing. This is saying any of those things that within your CSV file that really should just be represented a different way, you can do that through the lookup. Another thing that you can do that with is like the academic year. Let's say the file you have says it's 2015, 2016. You and I as a person would know, oh, well, that's 2016. But honestly, for some of you, that actually might be 2015, because I believe, Skyward, for example, they would consider this 2016, but maybe Focus would consider this 2015. So this is your chance to say, all right, what is the academic year really in Ed5? And then, here's for a different assessment. So that's what the lookup table is for. We also used it for rush flags. So like in the CSV file, if you see red rush flag, then know that that connects to this value. And then the next one that we'll jump to is the map itself. And I'm going to go to our ELA. Here's our CA iReady diagnostic, ELA V2 student assessments. And I'm going to edit this. And then you start up here at the top. You don't like, this is something that's already mapped. So you can see some things here. But you actually start up here at the top and you choose your CSV file. So you go out and let's see, I actually don't know that I have a CSV file ready to roll. But you would select your CSV file and click upload, and then it would actually present your CSV file here with all the columns and things that you could use as a reference. And then that's how this map then knows to go in and start mapping. So let's look at the next part. So here's the assessment reference. And at this point, yeah, okay, so it says map to which resource. So we're going to map it. So before in the Bootstrap area, we were mapping the assessment tables, really is what we were doing. Let me pull up the database again. And at this point now, we need to map the student assessment and the student assessment objective assessment. So student assessment is kind of like that. Your like your general scale scores, and like objective assessments would be like what were the scores that made up the sub scores in a sense. And so this is where when you're doing your like what data import calls map, you're mapping the actual student level data. Okay, and this is where Johnny got a 385 on his FSA for a scale score. This is where that data lives in these tables. So you can see there's actually a ton of tables around like metadata based things, general stuff, and then it kind of narrows on down and says, all right, here's student assessment. So what you're doing is you're saying, well, what are we mapping to? Well, I'm going to map to student assessment here, and you're using the file that you bring in. Now under these fields here, you get 3 options. And one of the options, so let's look at them. So we have column, lookup table, and static. So column would be like, all right, I want to grab this specific column from the CSV file, and I want to use that column and the information in it as the identifier. The lookup table, which I believe we have one down here with a lookup. Here we go. So the when assessed grade level descriptor. So here's where we're saying, all right, go out to that lookup table that we created, find the value of student grade, and then grab, let's see. So this is the this is the edfi value here, and we're going to map the edfi value to this lookup table, grade level number to text. So if we go back, I'm going to open up a second tab. This one, right? So grade level number to text. We're going to use this mapping, this lookup, and this is where we're going to say that it has to be this column in the CSV file, right? So this CSV file, grab the data from this column of student grade in the iReady CSV file, and use this lookup when you do the mapping. So in that CSV file, in this column, if you see a 1, then that means first grade. All right, and then the other option is column. What? Yeah, is column. So I'm sorry, it's static. So here's the static option. So in the static option, this is where we're just saying, I don't care what's in the CSV file. I want the identifier to be this. Now, if your CSV file has an identifier that you would consider appropriate, then yeah, use the column, right? Use the column option. Here's the column option. Here's the actual the column in the CSV file, student unique ID. And then the default value, that would be is like if it's blank, let's say you've got a row with a blank record, what do you want to default there? You could just put in like, I just want, you know, something defaulted there, right? And then when you look at your data later, you can see, oh, that's missing. And you would be able to identify that quickly. So the 3 options, static, I'm telling every single record that gets loaded, it has to have this identifier, and I don't care what's in the file. The column option is use the value that's in the CSV file, and here is the column header called student unique ID. and whatever value that kid has in that column, use it. And if they don't have a value, then use this, right? And then the third option is the lookup table. All right, I'm going to use a lookup table for when assessed grade level. Look in and the thing that needs to use the lookup in the CSV file is the student grade. And when you see this column in the CSV file of student grade, I want you to use this lookup that happens here called grade level number to text, which over here is like if 3 exists, then call it third grade, spelled out. Okay, before we go any further, I just covered a lot of information on the mapping part with some options. Does anyone have any questions?
Is there any way possible that there... Oops, I thought someone else was talking.
Go ahead, Shawnee. Yeah.
So since we have not done any APIs with any of the student data, I'm just thinking here out loud, just the opportunity of some sort of a sandbox project somewhere that allows any of the programmers, anyone on any of the districts to be able to go in there and kind of, have access to some of this to practice and play and, have something tangible to be able to kind of do some of these things. Because, we can sit here in this training session, and if we're not using student data at this point in time, what you don't use, you lose.
Yeah, well, if you have, if you want to do something with staff data, and you have some CSV files that you want to use to practice with, you definitely can. This use case today is just because NEFEC did its work with the assessment, student assessment data. You can definitely do the same thing with like HR data, since I know you guys are working with staff data.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So the other, I guess I probably should have mentioned this first, but you can see these are kind of broken up in boxes: assessment reference, student reference, administration date, administration end date. These really are the EdFi fields, right? So they pop up based on what you choose. So let's do, like, just to kind of help better, so you can see this without something being mapped. Let me just kind of back up and just click add data map, right? So I would come here and choose the file. Gosh, let me see. I'll go back and clean up some of this with the recording. Let me see. Just gonna see if I could find a. Sorry, this is I should have had a CSV file ready to go. I'll edit I'll edit some of this stuff in the recording for you guys, so you don't have to endure it. We've got it somewhere. Let's see. All right, bear with me, guys. Let's see. What if I have it locally?
Sure, I'm not sure it might help, but you could always pull that Grand Bend CSV from the
that's a good point. What I hate about that, though, and really that is true, that's what I need. Let's see if I can go get that. So this will be a good example, I guess, of what it looks like to go ahead and pull this in there. Click view. Let's see. Import templates. But I don't remember if that actually gives me the CSV file.
When you were showing the web page earlier, there was a link to pull the CSV from the EdFi tools web page.
Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah, let's look at that. Good point. Awesome. Thank you. Who is that that's giving me this information? Thank you.
That was Aaron. Yep.
Aaron, thank you. All right, great. I'll need to get that on my server real quick. Let's see. Yep. Okay. So we'll go to maps. We're going to add a map, choose a file. There we go. Cool. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, so this is what you can see. So this is I'm showing you this what we were just looking at with iReady, but like what it looks like before you do anything. So here is the CSV file, and if we were to look in the CSV file, we would see this data. But what data import does is it says, all right, here are the columns that you have, and here's the data within. And it just kind of gives you like a little preview. You give it a name. We call this Grand Bend training example. You select your version, and then now we're going to map it to the specific resource. In this case, and these are like just all the resources of EdFi. So if you see something here, then EdFi has it and can work with it. So if we kind of come down to staff, so for Alachua's case, the question was around like, what if we're not working with student data yet? Here are some staff data fields that you can work with. Starting probably with staffs, and then from there, you could load in your assignments and your employment records, and but you first do have to, in EdFi, you have to have staffs exist first. So you'd want to map that first, load your staff members, and then from there have a CSV file containing the other information that you want to load. In our case, we would choose student assessment. And based off of what resource you're loading here, that's what pulls up this information down here. So if I were to choose staff, you can see that information is different, right? And then the things that are with the little red star, those are the things that are required. So in other words, your loading of data, if you don't have these with the little red asterisks, it's going to fail, right? So you have to load those points. So in our case, that was student assessments. And I do want to try to keep this training to less than an hour. So I'm not going to try to go and map this whole thing.
Hey Sherrod, how would
yeah.
it handle like, let's say if you had a student ID, for example, on there, but one of the rows was blank, it was missing that field, would it fail?
If you don't put in a let's say you choose column, and then you choose this column will be student ID, right? Where's it at? Student ID. And so Mike, you're saying, I believe that's Mike, you're saying that, like, let's say, what if there's no ID here, right?
Well, I'm saying like all the rows had the data, but you might have one or two rows that was missing a valid data in it, and there might be X's in there or null or whatever the case is.
Yep.
Would the whole import fail because it was missing one row?
No, and that's what I love about doing this through the API, because this treats every single record as its as an individual send. And that's what I want to show you that too in the logs. It will load the ones, it will break every record down into an individual send to the API. If it fails, it will log that it failed, and you'll be able to go back in the log and see, oh, it failed. And then the others will continue on. So yeah, it's awesome. And then that's why I think in our case, I think we left this default value as blank, because if it was null, we didn't want it to load. We want to know it's null. So we want it to fail. And honestly, if you put X's there and you didn't have a student in the database that had all X's, then it would fail anyways.
Thank you.
Yeah. That record would fail, not the whole load, just the record. So let's these are great questions. Any other questions about this process, this mapping part? Okay. It took me some time to wrap my brain around it. So if you're a little fuzzy right now, you're not alone. If you feel like you got it 100%, then you're doing awesome. And this is really just meant to be an intro to this thing. I'm recording it, so hopefully you can go back and glean, you watch a part again, we watch it a few times and maybe it'll sink in, kind of thing. All right, the next step is an agent. So if you've got a mapping, right? So we've got, well, let's go back. So we've got a connection to the API. We've got a Bootstrap set of data loaded in that is not necessarily in the CSV file, right? You just know there's metadata that I need to load. Then you got a CSV file with student data. You upload that CSV file to data import. You're able to map all the fields out that you want. Now the next part is you need to load it, and that's where the agent comes in. And here's a list of agents. Ours is going to probably look a little more complicated at NEFAC than yours because, again, we do this for multiple districts. So, you see Dixie, Flagler, Lafayette, Levy, Putnam, Union. Yours is not going to have all of that, right? So yours is going to be probably smaller. If you have this many records and you're just one single district, that means you have loaded a ton of stuff, okay? All right, so let's go with Dixie, and I'm going to go with that ELA version 2, right? So here we are, ELA, kind of carrying that theme forward, Curriculum Associates, iReady Diagnostic, ELA v2. And this is also where you can connect it to the SFTP folder, right? So let's go into that. Let's see what that looks like. And I'll go back and modify the recording so you can't see things you shouldn't see here. But you give it a name, you choose the API connection. So in this case, we have a Dixie iReady API connection. Then you have an agent. In this, if I change this from SFTP to FTPS, it's gonna change the protocol there. If I select manual, you can see a lot of stuff goes away, right? Because in this case, I just have it locally and I'm going to manually do this. But in our case, we want this to be like a process, like a daily process that can run. And so we've connected it to the host, and it has a username and password, a specific directory, and then here's the file name, right? And we know daily that if there's new data, that it's always going to be called this, right? And so so that works for us. And then you enable it. And there's where we go get the CSV file. And then we connect it to the map, right? So we've created this map called CA iReady Diagnostic ELA Student Assessments. That's that big long map we were just looking at. You do that by selecting map and choosing your map. And you can see, we haven't done this, but I believe you can actually use one agent to load several maps. So maybe you have maybe you have an SFTP folder that everything lands already locally. You know, maybe you use several, and you got your several maps there. I don't know how that would work. In our case, we've always just done one agent per map. So if you explore using one agent for multiple maps and that works for you, great. Here are the bootstraps that load. This is actually an update. This screen right here used to be on a different screen. And so this is kind of newer for me to see all of them listed here, but here's the processing order that they load in, and we'll go to the bottom. You can set a schedule. In our case, you know, we've got this SFTP. We used to not be able to run it daily because we could only set one key and secret. And of course, each district has their own key and secret. With the version 1.1.0 release, we can now have an API connection for multiple instances. So we could actually set this up to be daily. And what this does is it goes out and it says, all right, if there's a new file after this time period, then I'm going to go grab it. So when you actually kick this whole thing off, it goes and grabs the file. This row processor, this is pre 2.6 version EdFi stuff, where there was not a way for us to make the conversion. Let's say we have the FLE ID as the student unique number in the ODS, but the CSV file has the other ID. This was something that we use, a little PowerShell thing. This kind of does it really does a lookup. When we first started using the lookup option, we didn't like that, so we switched to this as an alternative. You don't really need this at all now anymore, because I would imagine everyone here is either already on something later, like 2.6 or later, or you haven't started yet and you plan to start EdFi and you're already going to start on something where you don't need this. So any questions about the agent? Awesome. So the way you kick this thing off, it's a request. I've actually submitted this as a request. There is actually no button that says like run. I don't know why that is. So when you do want to run it, at this point you have to open up a PowerShell and you have to navigate to the, where's it at? Actually, I think it's on the D drive. You have to navigate to the location of where this is installed at. I have to try to remember where it's installed. Maybe it is F. Yeah. So sorry if you're a PowerShell pro. Hopefully that don't drive you crazy here. Oops, got to switch to the F drive. What is it? Data imports. I can't remember. Yeah, there's a folder. It's called Data Import Server. So you got to get into that one. And then you can see there's a ton of files in here. And the one you want is this one right here, Data Import Server Transform Load.exe. Oh. Let's go try to tab into it here. Data import. What's it called? Data import dot server. Okay. There it is. And you run it. And I believe in this case, because I don't have everything set up quite yet, it's gonna, I believe it's gonna fail. But it will go through, it'll look at the connections and it'll start running. So there's not an actual like run button, right? So, but I've asked them to do that. But you can, what's nice about this is that you can set this as a scheduled task through, you know, your server scheduled task option. Is it actually running? Is it going? So you can see here it's going out and it's going and grabbing those different, it's going to see if it's like, you know, do I need to grab a new file? Look, there's one it just grabbed. Failed to get access token. That's probably related to me having upgraded some things and I just haven't played with it yet. But really what happens is another way to monitor it is under your activity page. And you can see it started at 1:13 and 11:01, ran for 38 seconds. And I believe this is everything. So what we should be able to do is see, okay, that ran. Then you come over here to logs. And from here, what you would actually want to do is click this retry. And that would say, okay, we're going to load this data. And you could choose your API connection. And then under ingestion, this is where you see your results. So you can either see, like, give me all the errors, right? Filter it. And so this was from 10.7 that ran. Give me all the successes. We've ran some things before then. I don't know why it's showing older stuff. But you're able to filter down, and these are the individual records. So I hate to, I'm gonna have to go edit that out. But that's the actual JSON data there that loaded. And then the errors will be the things that failed, right? So if you open it up, you'll be able to see what record actually failed. And then at the application level, you'll kind of see, like, just at an application level, what's working and what's not working. So that's part of the log too. So that is like the full process. The last time we really ran it was like right before Christmas break. We ran it for iReady things for districts. And my goal now is, now that we're on 1.1.0, we were on 1.0.1 and now we're on 1.1.0, is to configure it to make sure it's processing all the districts nightly. Before we couldn't do that because they all had their own key and secret. Now we can, because of this new feature, to have multiple API connections. So any last questions before I, pause the program? Pause in the recording.
Just a quick question. It may be a stupid one, but since I haven't used it before, is this a replacement for, or is it the bulk importer that they used to have in the earlier versions?
You could use it as a replacement. The bulk, though, I believe the bulk loader actually uses XML. So, and I've used it like once, and that was with the help of a contractor, and it's not. We haven't really used the bulk loader much.
So you would use this in place of them, since you can schedule these jobs anyway?
I would say you could. If you have a bunch of XML file, a bunch of files already in XML format, then you might want to use the bulk loader. But if you're just starting out with a CSV file and you're just starting to work on that CSV file, yeah, I mean, that's what we don't use the bulk loader at all. So maybe that answers your question. Yeah, we use it as a replacement to the bulk loader. Does that help? Does that answer it?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Okay. And then Aaron, I see you posted, are these using post or put calls? So with the API, that's a good question. Is it a post or a put? I believe if we look at the documentation of EdFi, I believe with a put, you have to have the resource ID. I don't remember that off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure these are post. And a post uses the natural key, so you don't have to have like any kind of resource ID. Good look at it. Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I'm pretty sure these are post, Aaron. You could. It might also be in the documentation. We could look and verify that. But all right. Cool. Yeah. All right. I'm glad you guys attended the training. We're past 11, so I don't want to keep you any longer. Anybody else have any other questions? Feel free to reach out to me with questions, about any of this. Yep, you're welcome. Glad to do it. Yeah, glad you guys attended. I hope it was valuable to you. Get to see kind of the beginning to end here. I encourage you guys also to to use me as a resource, but also use Slack, Advice Slack channel. They also are there to answer questions. So I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.